sessions that you hadn't previously registered for. We were looking at the capacity of the rooms and just to make sure there was balance. So thank you for bearing with us on that. I'm now going to just go over to some of our colleagues who were involved in the breakout sessions to give a quick overview of the flavour of discussions for everybody. So I'm going to turn to Dr. Ian Petch first, Head of Psychology and Psychotherapies at South West London St George's Mental Health Trust, who was in the session for community mental health and community resilience.
Thank you, Ranjit. We had a fantastic discussion, unfortunately part of which I got thrown out of, so forgive me if I've missed anything, and Ranjit, you want to add anything to that? But I think many of the topics discussed probably fall into those three sort of building blocks of resilience when we think about resilience in mental health. What are those things we do to promote good well-being? What are those things that we can do to build social capital? And where do sort of psychological coping strategies fit? We had some interesting discussions about that might fit into that social capital category, and how we need to make sure that we don't misinterpret social distancing for social disconnection, and in fact how we need to redouble our efforts to make and strengthen social connections, because being connected, feeling connected to others is such a fundamental part of social capital that resilience in communities is dependent upon. We heard people talking about some of the very positive existing networks and connections that many of our community organisations are already involved in building and supporting people, but we also heard about an increasing awareness of people who are really struggling, some people who are falling through the cracks and perhaps might be more in need of more formal mental health support than building those psychological coping strategies. We talked about these, I think, these three things coming together in order to promote resilience in the community when it comes to mental health, and the need to probably extend and enhance all three elements. The right kind of investment and outreach of mental health services, developing an army, a community of mental health champions that will help support well-being and also help build that social capital. There was a much more detailed, rich discussion around some of those issues, but in summary, those were some of the key things.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Dr. Ian Petch, and absolutely describe that. There's a very strong conversation in terms of the impact on carers, and thank you for that. I'm now going to turn to Professor Sashi Hadaran, Ethnicity and Mental Health Improvement Project. Professor Sashi, over to yourself.
Thank you, Ranjit. I hope you can hear me. Like Ian, I also got hijacked into the main session before the breakout session ended, so I might have missed the last bits of the discussion there. I have, however, made 5 points emerging from the very interesting and stimulating contributions during the breakout session. First is that the lens of COVID has exacerbated existing inequalities, particularly ethnic race inequalities within our services, and also the marginalization of people as a result of racism. This was expressed very strongly by several people during the discussion. And the second point is that that there is in seeking solutions to the problems, we need to come together. We have to work together. We have to pull together. When we say we, that is very broadly defined. Institutions, community agencies, people who experience major, significant, long-standing difficulties, people who are vulnerable, people who are at risk, and this also includes BME resources in the community. We all need to come together, pull together. And thirdly, that importance of co-production of solutions, of services, cannot be overemphasized. But co-production becomes possible only by unlocking the assets that are already there in the community. We can't just say we are committed to co-production without investing in that process of unlocking, especially bringing people who are most at risk and most vulnerable and who experience multiple disadvantages in the community, bring them to the table. That's important. And doing things should adopt a blended approach. And institutional response and community response may not always coincide. So we will have to bring that together. And in this context, it's important to recognize that language, culture, people's ethnic backgrounds are very, very important, especially when we give out information and send out messages to the community. Finally, targeted interventions are necessary, targeting on people who are most affected and people who are most at risk. And again, this identifies the significance of targeted interventions at the most disadvantaged people, especially those from BME backgrounds.
Professor Sashi, thank you so much for such a detailed update on the discussions that are taking place. And I believe they are just the beginning of the discussions. And Professor Sashi leads the Ethnicity and Mental Health Improvement Project, which has built over 30 years of research work and 18 years of community development and co-production in Wandsworth. So we're really looking forward to that piece of work, and more can be found on the website. Details we'll give at the end. So I'm going to move us on to Jessica Tom, who's the Director of Commissioning and Partnerships at Kingston Richmond, who was in the impact of COVID-19 on children and young people, for a quick update.
Hi everybody. I just want to say a big thank you to our experts by experience, Dara, Aaron and Charlotte, whose experience that they shared with us actually really set the tone for our discussion. They spoke really well about the uncertainty that this time has been given, and young people's experiences of their mental health and well-being during that time, which led us onto discussion around one of the things that came up was the fragmentation within services in the system, and we talked about the need to collaborate a lot better as organisations and partners to ensure that there's a clear pathway and people are aware of what services are out there for children and young people to access. Given this time, there was quite a bit of discussion around the availability of services online, but also the need to continue engagement and that kind of face-to-face interaction as well. We had a discussion about the whole school approach and not leave out children that are excluded from mainstream schools. So when we talk about a whole school approach, I'm talking about children that may be homeschooled or in alternative school provisions. So there was a discussion around bringing that together and making sure that we're inclusive in that approach for children's mental health and well-being. And talking around really engaging with our children, young people, families, and what they've experienced to get solutions for us to kind of, once again, work more collaboratively as well. And we very briefly touched on the impact of not just COVID, but other things that are going on in the world around children, young people, and Black Lives Matter, and how all of this may impact children, young people's emotional health and well-being, and what we need to do to get around prioritising that and making sure that we design our services to meet children and young people's needs.
Jessica, thank you so much for that that update. I'm sorry, colleagues, if you couldn't quite hear that. I know there's some bandwidth problems, but what we'll do is we'll record Jessica's update and share that when we publish this video online. I'll just summarise really quickly, Jessica, if I may, for those who couldn't hear. I don't think anybody would disagree that the conversation in the group was around supporting young people and reducing the fragmentation in services, and also the impact of other issues that are taking place affecting young people and their families around COVID. So we will record that and put there. I'm going to hand over now to Ian Thomas, who's the Chief Executive of Royal Borough of Kingston. We're delighted to have you to give an update on the impact of COVID-19 on the economy. Okay,
thank you, Ranjit, and thanks for the expertise within our group. I learned a lot. So we covered diversification in terms of how local areas will need to diversify their local economies to respond to growth sectors. We talked about upskilling and reskilling our communities, working closely with our communities. We talked about financial inclusion, working with Job Centre Plus and DWP. Concomitantly, increased funding for mental health, all-age mental health services, which will be really important. We talked about tackling unscrupulous landlords and clamping down on them. And we also talked about signposting to community services. So in many of our areas, we have social prescribing, which is working really well. So signposting early will reduce the need for intervention later on, which is more costly and more often than not too late. I said at the end, actually, that you know, there's reason for our public health colleagues to be ebullient at this moment in time, given that they've been speaking for many years about social capital, and we've never needed it more than now. We haven't seen the extent of the recession kicking in. We have probably in this sub-region around 120,000 people on furlough, and so the impact has not been felt yet of this deep economic recession. So whatever we can do now is going to be really important, and therefore this summit is really well timed. So thanks to all for organising this. Thank you.
Ian, thank you very much for that masterful summary of such a broad-ranging issues, and I think it feels as if this is the start of a conversation and one that we must continue to build on in terms of develop as partners together. I think that we look forward to hearing more as we develop the action plan, and thank you very much for that. I'm now going to hand us over to Ambizi Milibanji, who will take us through the next steps. And I'm going to start with handing over to Anne.
Am I unmuted? Yep. So thank you very much to everyone for joining in the breakout sessions, and particularly to our experts by experience, who have obviously helped us to have a really rich conversation in all of those four groups. And thank you to the four of you that have just summarised that. I won't attempt to summarise it all again, but just a few reflections. Millie asked us at the beginning to be very open and honest. And I think people have been incredibly open and honest and shared their personal experiences as well as their professional experiences. And I think that's really important, not just for our own well-being, but actually, if we can say, actually, we've struggled. I'll admit myself to sort of going to the back door. I'm very lucky I have a garden, but wanting to just scream because lockdown seemed to be interminable. And I think it's really important that we acknowledge that all of us are suffering. I think there's a theme around intervening early. People have mentioned social prescribing, but actually getting ahead of that before some of these issues become really embedded and become serious mental illness. I think a number of speakers have talked about a whole system approach. I was struck with Pete's comment about we can't get well on our own. We need to create a mental health friendly society if we create the climate that people will find it easier to live within, we will do much better. I was very struck about the point, we all talk about social distancing, and I hadn't realized how inappropriate it was, because we're actually talking about, somebody said about physical distancing, and we should be trying to socially undistance and connect with people, because that will create this society. In my group, I was reflecting on all the others who were affected by this. So carers, people who work in voluntary groups, who have to provide services, and the fact that they're carrying an extra weight. And of course, the points that Sashi made around this whole pandemic has exacerbated existing inequalities, and we must never, ever forget that. So we've obviously had some really rich conversations, and we'll be using all that you've told us to create an action plan. What our ambition is to create a targeted program of prevention and things that will promote mental well-being over the next 12 months and beyond. And as somebody said, this is an excellent start, but it's only that. The real work starts now, and it can only happen, as many of you have said, if we work together to achieve the ambitions that we've set out. Now, I think we've had some great speakers, some very passionate speakers, some very committed speakers, and I have every confidence that if we work together, we can achieve this. And at this point, I'd like to hand back to Millie to talk about next steps.
Thank you very much, Anne. Before I talk about next steps in any detail, I too would like to add my personal reflection. What a very rich afternoon of input. I feel actually quite emotional, quite overcome with everything that I've heard and the chats that I've seen. I think one of the most important things that was asked very early on of us is, what can I do? And I think that's really important for us to take away, because we can't avoid that question as individuals. We can't avoid the fact that many of us sitting around here have actually got the levers to change things. And this is our opportunity, isn't it? We can't miss that window of opportunity. We will not be forgiven if we do that. And quite fundamental things were said today, because we were speaking very honestly, certainly in the group I was in. And we need to recognize that, and we need to find a way of moving ourselves forward. So thank you very much for a very emotional afternoon. But it's only worthwhile having these afternoons if we can then turn it into actions. And I think we've heard a lot today about how we can turn it into actions. What might be the priorities? What are the opportunities? And I promise you that as an individual, I'm sure I'm speaking for Anne, that we will together do what we can in our position. But of course, we have to work with everybody and be in collaboration. Ruth is on the line, very much in collaboration with the local authority and all the clinicians and all the practitioners who are going to help us through this. So if we can put the slide up, which summarizes what we are planning to do. I'll very briefly take you through that. So, is it coming up? Screen sharing? Yes. So what we aim to do, and of course we are very open to further discussions on this, that we will have a prevention task force, and that's come out, and there will be representatives from organizations and boroughs, people who are experienced, who are expert, to oversee the prevention. So the issue of prevention is very well taken. The EMHIP, which you've heard about, and there's a lot more to hear about it, will be supported and will continue, and we can extend it as we require. We need to put some more input into it as we've been asked, and we will take that away and have a look at it. But that's definitely a key priority. We will also be promoting some free well-being courses using the Recovery College. Those of you who've worked with the concept of the Recovery College, you know how important and effective it can be. And it seems to be that's the sort of kernel of work that we need to take forward and build. We will look at psychological distress. We'll try to gather more data. I think we need to always gather data, but we always need to gather emotions as well. So we will try to find a way of doing that. And then we are hoping, with your agreement, to have another summit later on in the year. It says on the slide autumn. I don't know when that is, but I think we mean when we are not in the middle of a second wave, and hopefully we're in a better place than we are at the moment. But that doesn't mean to say we're not carrying on with the work that we are promising to do. So that's very briefly the actions. As you've heard, we will have recorded all of the proceedings. This will be available, and I'm sure I speak for Anne and Ranjit and the whole team. They'll be very happy to continue to receive feedback, either individually or openly, so that all the work that we are promising to do can be enhanced and built upon. And I assure you, because I have been assured, that all of this will become real work that we would do, not just talking. So it remains for me to say thank you. Thank you to everybody who spent the afternoon with us. Thank you for an extraordinary experience. I will treasure it. I personally feel very grateful and very honored that I was invited to this session by Anne and colleagues. So thank you very much, and thank you, Anne.
Thank you very much, everybody. And we're just going to ask you to put your cameras on and give everybody a round of applause and to end the meeting. Thank you very much, everybody, and goodbye. See you. Bye-bye.